This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Zia and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And Jay,
Yes.
This is it.
We're at the finish line?
For 2021, we are at the finish line. We made it through another year. Season
11. Right?
11. We're entering Simpsons territory. You know, I
still can't wrap my head around that show is still on.
Or South Park is still on. I mean, when you don't have to pay actors to do anything.
Yeah, that's true.
They don't age.
Yeah.
Like us, we don't age. We're just animatronic Madame Tussauds wax figures that with the little AI inside pumping out these reviews.
AI now.
We are like Max Headroom. It's the end of the year. We typically look back fondly upon the year. This year, like last year, most of it was spent indoors, away from people, and that's all right with me. I think that's okay with you as well. And hopefully next year I have tickets to see Iron Maiden in October. And
did you get tickets?
I did.
Oh man!
And I would really like to go.
Now I need to get tickets.
If you don't, I bought 2. You can come up to Columbus in October, and we can go throw the horns together. But I'm just saying, you might have to fight Katie for them because. As I said, I went to see Waitress. She goes to see Iron Maiden.
Right.
That's how it works. That's how relationship.
What are those? What do those run you?
Ooh, about $150 each.
Oh my goodness!
I got good seats. I was a part of the pre-sale for the fan club.
Wait, what is going on? Like, I didn't know you were this. I mean,
it was the way to. That's how you had to get the early. I signed up for the fan club.
Okay.
So I could get the tickets on like Wednesday instead of Friday.
Right. Okay.
So this was like a bucket list thing. Like I've never seen like a new wave British heavy metal band like Priest or Maiden or any of those bands. I've never seen them live.
This is probably your last shot.
And I really did enjoy the last record.
Yeah.
Which we're not covering new records because we did that on our Thankful for 2021 albums episode. But I really did enjoy that new Iron Maiden album. And it kind of got me interested in I knew a lot of songs, but I didn't really know a lot of albums. So It got me interested, and I've been enjoying going back and listening to those.
Oh, yeah.
Like you, I've also been enjoying going back and looking over what we reviewed this year. A lot of good stuff came from both our patrons and from polls that we would have never listened to.
Yeah.
Had these things. This might have been, in terms of years where I didn't know the album, this might have been the most we've ever approached.
It felt that way.
I knew the bands.
Yeah.
But I want to say maybe 5 of these records. I'm talking about like Live Storing Copper, Sponges, Rotting Pinata. We'd listen to those.
Black Crows.
The Black Crows, Coverdale Page. But I mean, other than that, I mean, I had heard the first Ammonia record, but I had never listened. I don't think I'd listened to the whole thing. Maybe I did, but I don't remember if I did. Yeah. I heard the name Royal Trucks. I had heard the name, Jellyfish we were familiar with. Heard the name Widespread Panic, never listened to them. Heard the name Pinback, that sort of thing, but really never listened to a lot of these records. So it was a really, really interesting year, very diverse, made more diverse thanks to Josh's pick of the Tokyo Anal Dynamite by the Grigori don't know how to say that, but that's the most challenging pick we've ever had.
We definitely covered a lot of ground. If you go
Yes.
from that pick, I think it was within a few months we did Cowboy Mouth, which is almost pop.
And then Ida, which is
yeah.
folky, vocal led acoustic quiet numbers.
A huge record like Live throw in there. And Collective Soul was a huge record.
Yep.
Yeah. So we really went through the full spectrum, I think, this year.
Yeah. So looking back on 2021, of the albums that you didn't know going in, do you have like a favorite and maybe like a top 2 or 3?
Yeah, and my list and the ones I'm thinking about here were totally new discoveries for me, meaning I had never heard the band. Maybe had heard the name, but so I'm going to leave off stuff like Pinback, which I had heard some Pinback stuff, and just I hadn't spent a lot of time with that record, or
right.
Jellyfish, obviously, I'm aware of. But so what I'm looking at here, I have 5 records that really popped out to me as being totally new discoveries. So Shades Apart, Eyewitness. Every time that comes on, it just sounds good. It's fun. It still sounds production wise like really actually pretty modern, and it's just a lot of fun. Age of Electric, Make a Pest a Pet. Kind of a bit of a Todd Kearns fan, I guess, at this point, mostly for the stuff he does in the Extended Kiss family. But that record is really unique, and not at all, it was sort of a didn't know what to expect with it, and was pleasantly surprised. My top 3 would be Phantom Blue, Bad Reputation. Again, I kind of was familiar with the band name, and
you mean Built to Perform?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Built to Perform. And was really taken aback of just how heavy that record is, and how great it sounds, and the attitude in it, and the vocal performances. My second would be Big Heavy Stuff, Maximum Sincere. Every time that record comes on, I'm intrigued. It goes into a lot of different places. It hits like this late 90s, early 2000s kind of post hardcore vibe to me sometimes. It's a little gritty, but it also has got some great melodies to it. And it sounds great. And I think maybe the one that is most interesting is Tribe Abort. Kind of like the Age of Electric. It's hard to pinpoint like exactly, what to expect as you get into that record and where it goes, and some of the things that pop out, some of the sounds, some of the songs. But it's just got this like really cool mix of being inventive and creative, but also a tad bit nostalgic, because you do definitely hear of the time production, and maybe some stylistic decisions that are all that early 90s ish kind of production. But it doesn't necessarily mean it dates it in a bad way. It sort of just puts together that element with, I think, just a lot of creativity and some really strong songs and performances. So, splitting hairs, but that's one I really was impressed with, and every time it comes on, I'm drawn back into. So those are some that I discovered this year. How about you?
Well, I agree with all those. We had a lot of really interesting, diverse takes on basically guitar rock.
Yeah,
that ran the gamut. A few that you didn't mention that I also really enjoyed. One was the third album from Hoss, Bring On the Juice, which had that sort of like, I think I said it sounded like what I wanted Mudhoney to sound like. It's got that like Detroit, MC5, Scott Morgan, and Ann Arbor Stooges, because I know Eric Peterson likes to point out that the Stooges were from Ann Arbor, not actually Detroit, but mixed with the Seattle grunge sound. That was a fun record. Another Australian record, I believe, was Molar and their album Golden Duck, which got into that like fuzzy Cosmic Psychos and Ash sound. Was another record that, you know, is short and just brings the punch with its sound and hits you in the face. Another band that hits you in the face with a lot of riffs was Wicker Man. I like that self-titled sort of metal for anybody. It's kind of touched on a bunch of different sounds in terms of what you might be interested in. And then I know we reviewed the band or an album by this band a couple years ago and we didn't really like it, but that Wild Hearts record that we reviewed this year was such an improvement on their debut, that it really turned the band, my idea of the band around. All the songs were tighter. The melodies were really sharp. They seemed to like really grasp what they do well and really hone it for that record. But I agree with you. Like the Phantom Blue album was like a shot across the bow in terms of, man, this is really fun and interesting. And that along with the Big Heavy, it's kind of the opposite end of sounds, but the Big Heavy Stuff album, Maximum Sincere, you know, there's a lot of minimalism on that record, but it's also really cool the way that they break it down and really utilize space and let the drums really take the lead in some respects on that record. So there was a lot of good stuff. The Shihad record was really good, and then Shihad put out a record this year that was really good as well with Old Gods. So good stuff. I mean, I don't think that there was really a stinker that we listened to this year. I think there was some stuff that maybe just didn't click with us, but I know that there's been years where we were both like decent single, and I don't think either of us had a decent single on a record this year.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at my top 5, and these are all, you know, patron select suggestions, which are, I don't think any of these are poll winners. So these are, you know, picked by individually by our patrons who spend sometimes a year agonizing over what record they want more people to hear, you know. So it's always a fun surprise. And yeah, the Phantom Blue one again, that's a good example, I think, where low expectations, like, okay, this was like some kind of, you know, metal band from the 80s. How could this record possibly be? But I think it's a great example of you know, some people that were inspired by the 90s, you know, who maybe weren't supposed to be. You know, it's like they were getting pushed out the door, like a lot of other bands, like, no, we don't need you anymore. And it's like, well, no, we kind of are into this. Like, we're just a classic. We're just into rock and roll and like classic rock the same way that Soundgarden is. And, you know, just a good example of totally unexpected. And it was a lot of fun digging in that record.
Now, along with our album revisits, we also got to do a bunch of really good roundtable discussions with our group. Some of those were, you know, stuff like that we've done before, like Sophomore Slumps Revisited, which we did on the Gin Blossoms. Congratulations, I'm Sorry. We did a Neil Young in the 90s, part of our In the 90s series. And then we did Origins, which we've done before with Spoon and Modest Mouse on the Deftones. We did some one-offs with Guilty Pleasure Roundtable of the 90s. We did our Tours and Festivals series on Lollapalooza this year. Had some folks that went to Lollapalooza, which we did not go to. We also did a Lo-Fi in the 90s episode, double albums of the 90s. We did our first part 2 roundtable, bands reuniting. We covered in our previous one, we went up to like 2015, and then we did the last 6 years of reuniting with that episode. And then we did our first Origin in the 80s with Soundgarden, where we looked at a big band from the 90s and how they got their start in the 80s. And of course, we did another Thankful roundtable that we started last year, right around Thanksgiving here in the States. I don't think they have that in any other country, unless I'm mistaken. I think only the United States celebrates
Canon has a Thanksgiving. It's
Oh,
just
do
a
they?
different
Do they?
time.
Oh, okay.
It's like July or something.
It's in July.
We just use it as an excuse to do a year-end kind of wrap up on new music.
Exactly. And there was a lot of good stuff, which you can find out with the new stuff by subscribing to the box newsletter. But Jay, what was? Do you have a favorite roundtable from this year?
The one that stood out to me was Soundgarden in the '80s. It was a lot of fun to shake up the format just a bit, to dig into some of these bands that were super important in the early '90s and go back and look at what, they didn't just pop out of the ground in 1991. I mean, they existed prior to that. So to dig into one of the more successful bands that really defined, in a lot of ways what the '90s was, to go back to the '80s. And our guests on that were super strong. We had Sean, was in Seattle, and we had Rudy, who was in California, and they both had a lot of good stories and experience around seeing the band at that time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It was that. It's, a bit rare for us to find people, especially going back that far, that had firsthand accounts and can just give you a really good sense of like, what the vibe was like and what the band was like at that time, and, what the buzz around on the West Coast was, and seeing them change, getting that perspective too from our panel of either, fans who had found the band, maybe later, and sort of going back and discovering the catalog versus those who kind of lived it from the beginning was a lot of fun. So that one really stood out to me. And probably the Deftones, just because that's a band that I felt like I needed to know more about. And it just gave a really good opportunity to dive in that catalog, to understand, what made them unique, hear other people's point of view on them. It's just, it was a band I was aware of, but I just hadn't spent any time listening to the records. So for me, it was just kind of a good excuse to go, spend a couple days digging into that catalog and talking about it and understanding, what they represented and why they were important. How about you?
I agree with you on Soundgarden. That was probably my favorite, just because we had such a nice panel that really rounded out all aspects of their start. I'm a big Neil Young fan, so of course I like the Neil Young in the '90s episode. I've been a big fan of Broken Arrow for a long time. It's kind of an underappreciated record in his catalog, and it was nice to dig into some of the other stuff. I did enjoy the Guilty Pleasures because it allowed us to sort of define that, which we don't always. Some people are not happy to call it guilty pleasure. They just call it what it is. It's just something you like or something you don't like. So I think that was a nice discussion to have. And I mean, honestly, I like all of our roundtables this year a lot. I think we have strong groups of guests and lots of fun stuff to talk about. And I always love when we get to talk about the new music at the end of the year and what came out, because there's so much stuff that came out this year and was still coming out in the last week or so after that episode. So I hope that people get to discover new music via that episode, because it's I definitely got to find stuff, even though I'm searching every week. There was stuff I didn't know that came out, and I'm still looking for it. As far as our patron exclusive 80s episodes, Jay, we do 6 of these a year. This year we had Scratch Acid, The Sound, Psychedelic Furs, The Stone Roses, The Angels, and Ministry. I mean, that's a pretty 80s lineup right there.
Yeah.
Did you have a fave from those?
I think the Angels' Lifeline was a standout to me. That was, again, another band that is referenced a lot as being influential. They're in the US, they're a bit of a kind of a cult band that you hear other musicians talk about. People in cool bands talk about them and liking them. And I think what was interesting about it is it's their sound is not broad. I wouldn't say they sound like AC/DC, but in the way that AC/DC has a sound, they have a sound. It has a little bit more dimension. But what's remarkable about it is that sound recorded live And it's a long, double album, I think.
Originally, yes. Now it's like a triple, the reissue.
Doesn't lose any energy and doesn't get old.
No.
You would think, you know, day 12 songs in, you'd be like, okay, I got it, but it just keeps going, and I'm there for it the whole way. So, and from what I sampled and what we discussed, it might be some of the best versions of their songs. So, in a lot of ways, if you're interested in this band, this is probably the record.
A little louder, a little bit more edge to them live.
Yeah.
Guitars are just cranked a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one I would mention is The Sound. Just a band I had never heard of. It just captures that post-punk kind of new wavy early 80s vibe that not a lot of bands sound like. There's only, so many bands like New Order, and there's another band sort of in that space that that was a lot of fun to discover. It felt like a true discovery. And was like, a holy shit, I didn't know this band existed. Like this band should have been bigger, and like, why does nobody know about them? So it just felt like a true 80s discovery episode for me.
I agree with you. And what's funny is that in the fall, I keep tabs on my local record stores. They, a lot of record stores post videos flipping through their new releases, what they've got out, or what reissues have come in. And the entire Sound catalog got reissued. And the record store in town, one of them, Used Kids, posted that they had got all the records in. And I immediately, it was like a Sunday afternoon, and I messaged them on Facebook and was like, do you still have copies of this?
Yeah.
And they were like, yes. And I ran down there at like 5:45 before they closed and grabbed a copy, because I was like, I can't believe that I just learned about this band and now you have a copy of the record. Like, that is serendipity. And, it was a couple of months between when we recorded that to when I got the record, and I put it on and was like, man, I still cannot believe that this is not up there in terms of notoriety with Joy Division and New Order and those bands. Like, this is totally in that ballpark, but for whatever reason, they just got missed. Yep. And it's a great record. I agree with you on the Angels. I thought the Psychedelic Furs record was interesting in terms of where they sit in the 90s. They're better known for songs on other albums, but that record is really solid. It's a little bit more guitar oriented on that record than what they're known for. And yeah, so a good batch of 80s episodes this year. I'm looking forward to putting up more polls for next year, figuring out a theme, and putting out a poll. And we're always taking suggestions. So we have a lot of them already in the hopper for the 80s, but always looking for more. So
let's talk about our this will be for an opportunity to announce our new episodes we'll be dropping. For some extra content.
So it's the last episode of the year. We usually talk about what's going to happen in the coming year. So in 2022, Chip Midnight, who has actually been a part of the podcast since the very beginning, he did our first interviews for us with folks like Miles from For Love Not Lisa and Ruthie Morris from band's name I'm forgetting right this second. Magnapop, sorry.
Yeah.
It just emptied my head. I left my head for a sec. He's always doing stuff in terms of music writing and music interviews. He's been working for the Big Takeover for years, which is a great zine out of New York. Big fan of that zine for a long time. And he said to us, there's a lot of stuff that I want to do, but doesn't fit that zine since it's about new music, or it's about, more alternative and indie rock. And I'd like to do stuff that's, would fit well with your podcast covering the 90s and talking to people that are relevant to that era. So Chip is going to be contributing interviews. They'll be going out into our regular feed, and then you'll be able to watch the Zoom video over at Patreon. And we're hoping that we'll be doing a couple a month. And these will be just regular episodes. It's going to be extras that we're going to be throwing. So there's going to be some weeks where you're going to have 2 episodes in a week, and it'll be maybe a review from us and then an interview from Chip.
Nice.
And it's going to be awesome. I mean, we're going to be able to cover a lot more ground. And we haven't been able to do a lot of interviews unless they fit sort of what we're doing that week, because we're so full up with reviews and roundtables and Patreon polls that interviews have become a little tough for us to fit into the schedule. So when Chip offered this, we were like, this is perfect.
And I think if you're, one of our missions here is to just try to be, through the course of doing this, tell the full story of the 90s.
Yep.
And we got to hear from the artists. So we've done a lot of interviews in the past. We just have not been able to manage them of late. It takes a ton of time to get it done. So Chip is a pro at it. He's been doing it his entire adult life. Kind of puts us to shame with the amount of experience he has interviewing. So it is awesome for us to be able to bring him on board. And I'm intrigued by the idea that Chip's on our Discord now, along with our DMOU members, and be a chance to, if you want to hear an interview with somebody, you can let Chip know in the Discord and he'll go hunt them down maybe. So I think there'll be a lot of cool, like maybe albums that are up for polls that don't win, maybe reaching out and getting those artists on for interviews so that we can still include them in the podcast and get an episode out around them. So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And we got to I think the Discord over the last 2 years, since we've all been stuck at home, has really taken off, has been honestly a godsend for a lot of people like myself who get to interact with not just patrons, but just people we get like to hang out with, talk music with, and get to have an open discussion without, a lot of arguing and judgment, and hey, everybody's got their thing and everybody's can kind of, rally around Sugar Ray if they want to, and discuss whatever they want.
It's all about the stuff that make you happy.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun.
People respect it and celebrate it.
And it's been a great aspect that we've really enjoyed over the last 2 years, and hopefully continue to grow. And not that we're capitalists and we need to continually consume more space and turn up the stock value so that we can make the shareholders happy, because luckily we don't have anything to worry about with regards to that. Our growth is predicated on your happiness. That's our index fund.
Yeah, we just want to provide the opportunity to talk about fun stuff and tell stories that we want to hear told. And the more support we get, the more we can do that. So it's awesome to see the community aspect taking off, and I'm with you. It's been a great way, as an older adult male, it is not easy, especially during a pandemic, it's not easy to find people to talk to and nerd out to that don't want to argue with you on social media or get in a fight. So
does Courtney take you down to the dad park where you can meet the other dads and Star Wars?
I feel seen.
Star Wars. Vinyl records.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, if this is your first episode, that seems like an odd one to choose, but we want to remind you that you can support this podcast by going to Patreon at Dig Me Out Union or DMOUnion.com. That's where you go. Sign up for the union. You get to vote in polls. You get to join our Discord. Talk music. It's also where you can read the box newsletter that goes out. You can also sign up for the box newsletter at digmeoutpodcast.com and submit album suggestions every month. A new poll goes up, 9 albums to be voted upon by the Patreon community, and then argued over who actually voted on what, because they can't believe that a particular album won. It's quite entertaining to watch that every time it happens. Who is voting for this? Why is this winning?
I feel like we need to start doing polling,
exit
predicting
polling?
Doing exit polling and predicting the poll before we actually post the poll.
Right. There you go.
We can set everybody up. Like Meat Puppets has a 39% chance of winning.
Maybe we should do like college football, where before we even tell them what's in there, we just tell them
we just
who's
rank
number
them all.
one, and that's how. And then if somebody happens to be better than that, then good luck to you, Cincinnati, because you're from a small
we
conference.
just
so you don't
pre-rank
deserve
them,
it.
and your vote has to overcome the ranking we've already decided.
Yeah. So I want to do exit polling. So you voted for Coverdale Page, but yet
you've never voted for a Robert Plant or a David Coverdale project before.
You've exclusively voted for things that didn't have guitar in them. Can you explain? We should. Yeah, that's the way to go. Last but not least, Apple Podcasts. That's where you go to leave positive feedback if you enjoy the show. Jay, we're done. Let's take a week off. Shit, we can't. You know what? We're just going to come right back. We're going to do another one next week. We never stop. We are the Terminator of podcasts. Melt us in a vat of fire and metal, and we will come. Our hand will reach out, and we will find a way. Our liquid metal bodies will reform, and we will be back here the following week. Only derailed when our teams make the playoffs every 20 years.
Right.
So in 2040, we might have to push an episode based on our teams making the playoffs.
This is true.
So for the last time for 2021, we're done. We're out. For Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. We'll be back next year with another episode of Dig Me Out.